Hello and welcome to Sound Solutions R&B Takeover. My name is Becky.
My name's Renee.
And we are the interns that have taken over the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening to our first episode that just introduced us and talked about what the podcast is and what you can expect.
Also, if you did listen, we had some technical issues with the email that we originally put in there, so we changed the email. If you want to submit information, like we're still looking for patient interactions that are funny, that made you cry, that made you laugh, that were really insightful or were really terrible. And we're also still looking for resources. You can submit that to intern at musicworks with an X Inc.com. That email will be in the description. We're also going to make a subscription list, which you'll see on social media, on Facebook. The link will also be in the bio of Instagram. And we'll also have it on Twitter where you can sign up and get notifications that our podcast is being released. So please subscribe, and we're also looking for those interactions and help us out. That being said, at the end of this, stay tuned. There will be a resource available for y'all. Listen up.
Well, hopefully listen to the whole podcast, but the resource will be at the end. So today we are talking about generational viewpoints in music therapy. We decided to do this as our first episode because this was kind of what started the podcast. Renee and I had a lot of conversations about, the state of music therapy because we just got out of school and that's what they make you do in school. So we had talked about that a lot, and we talked about how these conversations change depending on who you were talking to and how each generation seemed to have different priorities. And we really wanted to put that together on a platform so we could look at all of those, because we also think that there are a lot of very similar goals that we're all just viewing differently, as well as just some blatant disagreements.
Oftentimes, we don't get this opportunity to have this overall or overarching viewpoint. So we interviewed 5 different people, from student, intern to first year, somebody who's been in the profession 20 years and 40 plus years. And this is a platform and a spot where we can sit and say, hey, here's where we're all at. Yeah. Compare, contrast, and talk about it.
Yeah, what does this think? What kind of conversations does this then foster? Because these people do go over that spectrum of the generations. However, everybody's going to be different. Everybody's background's going to make their views different. And obviously there are many more factors than what generation you're from in music therapy.
But to start this off, we asked the question, what is the current state of music therapy? First, we'll have Leah Weigel, who has been at MTBC a little over a year and is currently in San Diego working with populations and clients. And she's originally from Pennsylvania. Then right after, we'll have Sarah Thomas. She's from Oklahoma, and she's doing her undergrad, equivalency undergrad at Oral Roberts University, but has her original degree from Tulsa University.
And then following that, we'll have David Nicholson, who is originally from Massachusetts and currently completing his internship at the Jimmy Fund Clinic in Boston, Massachusetts.
So without further ado, Leah.
So I've been certified for a little over a year, and my perspective of it is that we're in a paradigm shift, and I think it's kind of reflective of the rest of culture right now, where we're moving towards more diversity and inclusion and awareness of biases that we all hold. We're looking more at what identities and privileges we hold as therapists and how that influences the way that we're doing therapy with people that are specific diagnoses or just might come from a different background than us. So I think the state of it is really exciting because there's a ton more research coming out and it's getting recognized as more valid than I think it's been in the past. I think almost everyone that I know now has at least heard of music therapy, whereas when I was in high school and I would say, oh yeah, I want to study music therapy, I got a lot of people asking me, well, what's that? Or what does that mean? And not a lot of people are aware of it, and I think that's due to media.
In the general view of therapy, I think music therapy is highly underrated. But I think it's just because there's a lack of understanding of music therapy benefits to the vast number of populations served. Also, there's that stigma that music is only for entertainment purposes. I don't have firsthand experience, but I've heard from fellow music therapy students, interns, and professionals that have been called, quote-unquote, entertainment, or the music people. and others have been turned away altogether. So overall, I think there could be more public education. This includes, but not limited to, pamphlets, blogs, videos, podcasts, or even live mock demonstrations of what music therapy can do. And this would be all with the main purpose of educating the general public. Music therapists can read research articles for the latest and greatest music therapy techniques. But I think the general public would benefit more from those same educated music therapists presenting music therapy in everyday terminology.
In my opinion, and my opinion certainly is just mine, but I certainly see it as a profession that is growing, and I don't say that in terms to discredit any of the growth that's already happened or any of the amazing strides that music therapy has gone through before I just so happened to encounter it. But I mean it in the sense of being in a medical facility right now and seeing how much of a buzzword music therapy, or how buzzwords I guess, but music therapy, it fosters this sense of enthusiasm in people that I think doesn't come up as quickly with other routes of alternative care, which isn't to say that those are better and some are not, but to say that music therapy right now clearly has a place of growth and expansion and enthusiasm in medical facilities, and especially in the one that I'm in. So I think that the familiarity with music therapy is growing, as well as the trust. And so as I sort of saw it through my academic program, music can sometimes be what separates the music therapist in the facility as getting to the point of being seen as an entertainer or as somebody to distract. But I think that in that same vein, music is, what includes us. And without the music, it wouldn't really be something that, existed in the first place, to be so frank. So I think what ultimately can separate us can also include us. So being aware of that balance and going forward with that same essence of growth and expansion, acknowledging that balance actually, I think, will allow the profession and allow the individual music therapist to grow and really accept that newfound trust and familiarity that is being seen on more of a mainstream level, which is really exciting.
We even interviewed Dr. Reuer and Dr. Wagner, and they all talked about the piece of it growing at a rapid rate and the fact that we need diversity and how media is affecting that, but also the fact that there's still a lack of therapists in the field. That's the reason why there's that entertainment piece.
Yeah, prior to these interviews, I never thought about it. And in other parts of the interviews, people brought this up, that we always complain or have these conversations about other musicians coming in and not trying to do music therapy, but using music therapeutically. And there's always that education gap between what do you do? What do I do? How is it different? How can we both be helpful? But I never thought about the fact that there's more of a gap, I guess, for non-music therapists to come in due to...
I see what you're saying.
Due to the lack, the lack of music therapists.
There's a big gap in the fact that there's not that many music therapists, which later, I think Leah talks about for one of the problems is the economic issue where they're it's hard to get into the field of music therapy.
Availability. And that's the other thing is I feel a lot of the younger generation talks about, can we get a job? How are we going to get a job? Where are we going to get these jobs? But it's really just that balance of there is a shortage of music therapists, but at the same time we're in this weird paradigm where there's also a shortage of music therapy jobs, even though we need music therapists.
So there's more population than therapists that are currently working. With that being said, that also backing up to the expansion is our research. Yeah, we have research that's being more and more accepted widely, but it's still not solid enough to be an active member, occupational therapy. I think you brought up a statistic that we're pretty close to the timeline of occupational therapy, and they soared over music therapy.
As far as education and just general public knowledge about occupational therapy, I think there's something a 30 or 40 year difference. But yeah, there's a huge difference in that public education of what music therapists do, which all of us deal with. We all answer the question what exactly is music therapy? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, how do we like balance that input and output in a way that's like financially stable for young music therapists? And then within that, how do we use our resources right now? Like all of our people that we interviewed talked about social media and like how that has exponentially helped us, you know, spread the word about music therapy and talk about what it is and show what it is. But is that enough? Do we need to look at other models like occupational therapy and like how did they break in to like the medical field? Like how did they become such a known therapy, and what can we learn from that?
And I think in 30 years, we as a profession can get to that level. Walking around the hospitals in my internship, I'm noticing that if I'm consistent and I'm on that floor scheduled, nurses and other staff will look for me and make sure that I'm integrated into what's going on, or like people from the palliative team will be like, why weren't you at our meeting? Like it's about consistency.
That's awesome too. I'm just saying.
I know. It's such great progress. So that being said, is like we're all growing and we're trying to have the resources to stay, and there's other musicians that come to the hospital and fill that gap, which creates
confusion. Like it's confusion.
Yeah.
Like what is music therapy? What is the difference between what you're offering and what this other person is offering? Within that too, though, something that Leah talked about, but also Dr. Wagner, which for time's sake we weren't able to include, but is the diversity.
Yeah.
So we know what is the state of music therapy is like a super broad question. We're very aware of that. But the reason why we wanted to include it is because there are such diverse answers. Like it's on the East Coast, like where I went to school, music therapy was much more integrated into the healthcare system than like where I'm from, like in Colorado. You walk into a hospital and you're like, are there music therapists here? And they're like, oh yeah, we have like volunteers that come and play in the lobby. You're like, not the same thing, but thanks.
I've heard that before too. So it's very different. And I thought it was interesting that Leah stated that more people are aware. And I think that's maybe because she's in San Diego and it's more readily available. I'm not sure, because where I'm from, that was, when she stated that, it like completely threw me through a curveball, because I was like, no, not my experience.
Yeah, well, also, that was the thing that both Dr. Reuer and Dr. Wagner stated, that their the advocacy is still a huge part of where we need to grow in music therapy, which we talk about later.
So this ties in with a different perspective. Our second question, which was, what things about music therapy do you think the other generations outside of your own do not understand or see differently?
After hearing from Sarah, we're going to hear from Dr. Reuer, who is the CEO and founder of Music Works and Resounding Joy, which are a music therapy private practice and a music therapy non-for-profit in San Diego County. Dr. Reuer has been practicing in the field and running this business for over 40 years. And then we're going to hear from Dr. Wagner, who is an MTBC on the East Coast. She did most of her schooling and is from Pennsylvania.
Been in the field for 23 years, and in the last 6 years has started teaching. She's primarily working in Connecticut.
From my undergrad experience, I sometimes have the feeling that my professors were so far removed from their own undergraduate training that they had a more difficult time relating to their students who are so new to music therapy. And sometimes it seemed as if the teachers had a more difficult time explaining the material to the students, that was actually within the student's learning ability.
I think the biggest difference is maybe in the way how my generation might see things and how a younger generation might see things. I think some of those things are good and some of those things are not bad, but different, right? And in terms of, how we work, maybe somebody from my generation has grown up with a completely different concept of work ethic and what that means, whereas the younger generation, really brings into play self-care and the importance of that, and that's important, right? So that's a good thing. I think sometimes a younger generation expects things fast, and the older generation has really had to struggle to bring these things to the forefront. So I think maybe we are a little more patient, or we're a little more patient in the process, because we knew it was going to take a while. As for my generation, music therapy was only a profession for 25 years. So that's not very much in the infancy. So there was a lot of building that we had to do, and that took a lot of effort and a lot of work. Whereas I think with media and all those kinds of things, everything being instant these days, instant this, instant that, I want to hear from you right away instead of waiting for 24 or 48 hours. And I'm not saying that you as a therapist is doing that, but society in general expects to hear from you right away, or they're frustrated, right? So it's that vast expectation. Some things just take a while to grow. A good cup of coffee needs to be steamed really well in order to taste good, right? So I think sometimes the biggest difference I feel is maybe patience from my generation to maybe the youngest generation. And just knowing that it sometimes takes a little while for things to come to the forefront.
I think it's important to honor our roots, but not feel tied to them all the time. And as a Generation X, I think one of the things that we're known for is you kind of put your head down and do the job, and our generation doesn't necessarily need the pat on the back. And I really I tend to value that about my generation, because I think that's what a lot of us have done in the field is we just do the work, we get it done. I don't feel the need for, adulation, for my name to be everywhere, because I feel like the work is more important than the honor for it. And I think in some ways, though, that's held some members of my generation back as we move forward, because we're not necessarily out there self-promoting. We've gone through a very territorial phase where there's a lot of people from my generation who feel like, I own this and this is the way I do it. And there's not as much collaboration and sharing that I think that could have happened, especially before we were more connected through technology and various other ways of staying connected with each other, that we sometimes get lost in our own little worlds because we're putting our heads down, we're doing the work, and we don't always reach out to each other and find out what each other are doing and grow with each other in that way. Or, as I was saying, the territorial nature of it is, this is mine and it's only mine, and if someone else is doing something similar, there's that sense of mine's better, or the judgment that of how either judging ourselves or judging each other. I do think that's a generational thing that I've seen a lot of growth in younger generations. There's less sense of being territorial about your work, more collaboration, and willingness to take the field in new directions.
So I really loved this question overall, because I think this is where the root of a lot of miscommunication happens, is that in a field that is so small, we still have like our first and second generation of music therapists practicing. So we get to have these conversations where we're like, whoa, your views are so different because you literally did not have textbooks, which I know people are going to laugh at, but that's weird to get into a field and be like, yeah, we wrote the textbooks, as opposed to the rest of us being referencing people like Tout and Brusha and other music therapists that are still writing. They're still writing our textbooks. Mm-hmm. So I think that creates a huge difference. I think within that, though, there's also more of that age gap, like Sarah was talking about, between who our professors are and the incoming students coming in. Are our professors still practicing music therapists? How much has changed since they started practicing? I mean, yeah, they wrote some of our research, but where is that gap? Where's that relatability? Also, that ties into the financial aspect of it, too. I mean, the music therapists that taught me at Berkeley were amazing, but the process for them getting certified financially as well was very different than the process that I went through and the financial strain that I had. Not that it diminishes anything across the board, it's just the economy is different. Mm-hmm. And it ties into those things about diversity too, who has access to music therapy education.
Yeah, I also think ties into Dr. Reuer's thing about patience. Part of the reason why not only does social media make us impatient, that has been scientifically
shown several times.
Yeah. So I do agree with that statement, but I also I have to go through schooling. I went to a private school, so I have those bills. My internship was a 4-credit class that I had to pay for, so I had to pay for $4,000 to be here. I'm also unpaid as an intern, which is a very common thing across America, having unpaid internship. So we want to get the ball rolling, because not only do I have $40,000 a year in debt, I have other expenses of living and breathing and eating that I have to account for.
Pretty soon
so
we're going to have to pay for air, so you know. It's
pretty
just,
much. It's going to be like the movies Lorax.
Yeah.
Hair. Anyways, but that being said is like, I know I'm very impatient when it comes to the fact that I need to be paid because I want to live as well, and I want to be an active member, and I want to donate my time to help with music and music therapy, but it's just like not applicable. The amount of debt that I have, just I think my work ethic is super strong, and not saying Dr. Reuer like attacked that because she didn't. She was very clear that like everyone is working and they're working on different things, and self-care is something that my generation is bringing to the forefront, which I think is necessary, and so did she. But it's just the fact that we are
impatient, but we're impatient for good reason.
Yeah.
And that's something,
Yeah.
for time's sake, we weren't able to include. But David brought up this fact that, you know, the current generation right now is impatient. We're like, all right, let's go. Like, let's put it on paper. Like, you're telling me that I have to do these things. Let's do these things and let's get it figured out. But that also can be a drawback sometimes because we're so gung-ho that we don't realize those steps that, like, lead us there. And I think that is also miscommunication because it's that lack of groundwork that some young professionals have coming in that really separates that, or I guess that brings about that sense of impatience that some of the older generations see because they laid that groundwork. Like, they were literally the ones that laid that groundwork.
Yeah.
So they're like, no, you have to do these steps to get there. We figured out how this is how you build it. So finding that balance between like, we're gonna go do it, but like also we need to make sure that we have that solid groundwork before we do.
Which ties into what Dr. Wagner said, being like honoring our roots, but also not being like tied to them. We definitely need to honor the forefront that let and like pave the way for us to be in this profession so I could sit in the seat that I am sitting in today.
But yeah, that doesn't need to tie us.
Another really cool point that Wagner pointed out was the ownership. And I think this is a really funny point because we made the podcast because we noticed that there was a lack of resources that were free for us to obtain to be better therapists. Because as a profession, as I just stated, with my economic status, I am not able to pay for the booklets and like these really awesome resources.
But at the same time, every other music therapist is trying to figure out how to get paid. So if you can sell those resources, that's a source of income.
Yeah, so it's like a really weird cycle that's kind of hard to balance because we all want to get paid and we're not getting paid, and those who are coming into the field need to be paid as well as everyone else, but like we can't afford to buy resources or buy our AMTA membership and be a part of that because it's just not in our budget. And part of that is, I think, the miscommunications that we have, and in all areas, like the public, within therapists.
But then it also stops us from collaborating, which is like really what like Dr. Wagner said is that, you know, there's this element of like ownership, like this is my music therapy, this is my like assessment, and like you put your name on it and you let other people use it, but there's not as much collaboration. You get into those silos of like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm focusing on. And we have conferences where we like come together and talk about it, but we kind of just like come together, at least in my experience, as a student, is that we come together and we talk about our own silos. We're like, yeah, we're here. This is what I'm doing. And somebody else is like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. And like Dr. Wagner pointed out, like sometimes there's that self-judgment and that judgment of others, but I do think that's getting better. And that is how Dr. Wagner finished that up, is that she thinks that the younger generations are more collaborative and like really taking ownership of music therapy as a whole and as a community, which I think is really important. Like we need to make sure that we're building our own community to move forward and working together as opposed to like everybody working so separately
or even against each other in some cases. Which this points out our next question: what is the top priorities of growth or change in the music therapy field? And we're having everybody comment on this one because it was really cool to see and compare everyone's different viewpoint.
Yeah, we said it was going to be a 30-minute episode, but sorry, y'all. Like, we got some really good input that we were really excited about. So first, we're going to hear from Leah Weigel. Then we're going to hear from Sarah. Next is David. Then we're going to hear Dr. Reuer. And then finally, we're going to hear from Dr. Wagner.
I think that approaching what we offer as music therapists in a way where it's chunked down by how we pathologize people can be a problem, because not every person who has Down syndrome has the same goals or needs. And not every person that has dementia is going to have the same needs. Not every person in the hospital who, just had surgery is going to have the same needs. It seems a little funny to me to chunk it in that way, and I think a change that could happen is to, rather than chunking it into like the educational aspects of it, we need to give ourselves space to see individuals outside of what their disorder is or what they might be coming to music therapy for. Yeah, so philosophy over pathology, or goal-oriented therapy over, okay, this person has autism spectrum disorder, so then I'm going to treat them with this one specific intervention. I think that can limit us, and I would love to see that shift, especially in colleges and universities.
I think that feedback from those out in the field to those in upper management, those that are, making policies about music therapy as a whole, will keep music therapy running like a, well-oiled machine. Another point made during the open mic session was that the ANTA website could be more accessible and just updated in general. You go to other websites from associations, and they look really hip and cool and like the most current web platform. And you can really tell that the AMTA website is just a little bit out of date.
The number one thing, in my opinion, again, is informed expansion. I think that it's really, really awesome to see how many people are now coming with questions and with curiosities and with excitement and with enthusiasm in regards to music therapy. And I think that it can so easily expand and become, one of the most accessible therapies out there. That would be fantastic. But to do it and prioritize that element of being informed, sometimes I think that things can grow with enthusiasm in ways that aren't necessarily practical toward development, I would say. So, as it goes forward, like I mentioned, like having those protocols being defined across the board and having new and increasingly individualized assessments coming up where you can implement those in more specific facilities and finding ways to really just increase the protocol and assessments that are out there. I know that my supervisor has talked with me a lot about this in terms of, language and shared language throughout the practice and being able to better communicate and streamline communication between facilities, whether that just be outpatient and inpatient, if we're talking about, the medical setting, or whether that be, with interdisciplinary teams or interprofessional teams. And I think it really does come back to that informed expansion and that informed growth.
I really feel strongly about supporting the larger organization. So I really feel that our membership in the association, the American Music Therapy Association, really needs to increase. I understand, that music therapists don't always have the salaries that can support membership. More numbers can help more of us out there in our world, because we're still a very, very small profession compared to any other field we know, whether it's nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, on and on we can go. There's hundreds of thousands of those people, and there's 7,000 or 8,000 of us, right? So I think we really need to understand what that means to have a larger organization to advocate for us. Secondly, I think licensure in every state is really important. But the only way we can do licensure if we grow as a profession and if we support our national organization to create the funding sources that come back to the states.
Again, there's so many things I could talk about here, but what comes to my mind first is truly the advocacy piece and the education of people outside of our field is the first thing that comes to my mind. And it ties back to my response to the second question, because there's so much misrepresentation and misunderstanding. And I think a lot of it is because people are passionate about music, that, most individuals have a personal relationship with music and have felt the healing power of music. Most facilities recognize the healing power of music and want to bring that to their clients, but they don't always understand what it is they should be looking for. And I think we as a profession, it's hard because here we are doing the work and in the trenches and meeting our clients, or educationally we're training people to go out there and do the work. And at the same time, we also have to be teaching people what it is that we do and why it's valuable and why we should be paid a fair wage for it and why their clients need it. And especially in the climate of healthcare with the financial climate and reimbursement issues, we have to always be fighting for our place at the table. Our clients want it, I think many of our administrators want it, but it is a matter of it being a priority. And the second piece of that, and it goes back to the second part of the question, the answer for number 2, really is our education and how we are educating future generations of students. And I know that has been a priority within the organization, within the AMTA as well. But really being sure that our education is, well, it doesn't have to be the same at every university, and it shouldn't. Every university needs their identity. But we do have to come out with basic competencies, and I really advocate for an integrated perspective of the field instead of practicing, I only do this work, and I only do this work, and this work is better than this work, and this is superior to the other orientation or the other approach. That we're better trained to be able to meet the needs of our clients, perhaps from an integrative perspective and not only living in one way of practice. I don't think you have to or should practice every type of music therapy or every approach, but I think we need to honor that that there's room for all of us and there's room for all of the perspectives, and we need to know our identity and be trained in a way that is responsible to be able to practice effectively.
I think it's really interesting how Sarah talked about AMTA, and so did Dr. Reuer.
Yeah, AMTA is like, I don't know about your school, but like AMTA was just a weird, disconnected topic at my school.
It was not at my school. I was required to listen to this, y'all. My undergrad, I was required to go to 2 regional and 1 national in order to graduate. Conferences, yeah. So it was very integrated in what I was learning. We constantly referenced the ethics, the code of ethics, the code of competencies, all that stuff. We had to constantly go on the page to figure out where we're lining up. So it was very, very much a part of my education. But
it wasn't on mine, though. Like,
yeah,
that's
so strange.
It is, because like we definitely talked about it. We talked about, the code of ethics, and we talked about, what AMTA was, and of course, like our intro class, like we memorized like the association and like all of that kind of stuff. But we were encouraged to go to conferences, but it was much more like a social aspect, I guess, or like a community aspect for us to go to conferences. It was less about AMTA and more about like, these are your people. You want to hear the research. You want to hear what they're doing and collaborate and network. And then like, our professors are going to be so upset with us. They're like, that's not what we meant.
I know, but it's how it was perceived.
Yeah.
Talked about the perception change.
Yeah, those communication
Here we go.
gaps. But that's the thing is we definitely had it around us, but I guess like I never went onto the AMTA website outside of my job as a research assistant for the music therapy department, like unless it was for an assignment, but I only remember assignments my senior year. And maybe that also could be because of who my professors were, though, because my professors brought in a lot of their own material and started a lot of the programs in Boston. So they had a lot of that stuff to draw on. But yeah, I didn't even like consider becoming an AMTA member until I started internship.
I think in order for me to be enticed to obtain a membership again, it's got to be cheaper, but I understand like the whole financial aspect that we talked about earlier. But it's also out of date. That's so pertinent because I remember talking to our senior interns who left.
AMTA isn't out of date. The website is outdated. That's what we mean.
That's what we mean, yeah, correction. Yeah, so I was talking to my senior interns, and they would go to the website, and the jobs posting there are so out of date. People rather go to the Facebook page to communicate, which...
Well, I mean, okay, so I will say, we did talk about the fact that the website was out of date at Berkeley. I do remember having that very clear conversation because we always would direct students to the AMTAS page, not the actual website. And this seems really trivial, but I think this is like something that the younger generation really sees, is that when you're marketing something, when you're trying to prove yourself in a field, we live in a digital age. Like, my brother's a software engineer. If he were to log on to our website, he would straight up just leave. He'd be like, no, what is this? This isn't like, it doesn't present itself in a professional way in the year 2019. Like, it doesn't look like it's an actually established profession.
And that being said, if we, and I understand the collective of coming together as a group in order to make change and get that licensure, And in order to do that, we have to get the small details worked out, like a website, and getting us all integrated into one system so that we can move forward and we can be a better community.
And then having education on that too. Like when you ideally, and I'm sure this is not an original idea, but when you Google music therapy, the website should come up and it should be accessible and make a lot of sense. B, there should be interactive ways for people to learn about music therapy on there. We have blocks of text on the AMTA website right now. No sixth grader who's looking up stuff for career day is going to read through that. If we have videos, which we've had amazing like master's projects and stuff that have come out from people in our field explaining what music therapy is and working on that advocacy piece. If those are the things that come up, like when you open up the AMTA like page, we're going to get so much more interactive education and people willing to be educated, I guess, if that makes sense.
And as we come together, just bridging that gap between AMTA professionals / people who are not, and having that open communication on who's running that board and what we need and change, that goes all the way back to what we previously stated on our different perspectives and really coming as one as a community.
Dr. Reuer brought this up in her response, that one of her top priorities is membership in AMTA. And it is important. Like, that membership in that association is how we come together
and grow
and like how we get licensure and all of that stuff. But how do we make it accessible, and how do we make it something where it doesn't feel like the us and them? Because that's, at least to me, that's how the conversations have gone about AMTA that I've been a part of.
Yeah, I agree. And then localizing or getting, this would be cool. I know we make money off of our research, but you need to have a membership to access that research. But as a professional, let's say physical therapist who wants to read research, is there a way? I'm not sure because I've not looked, but getting Journal of Music Therapy more accessible to other therapists out there. Like, that's another advocacy
Well,
piece.
the other aspect of that, though, would be having music therapy articles published in other journals, which is just like a whole other step that we are starting to get into. I mean, like, I remember several of my research projects. It's always very, like, exciting when you're like, yes, music therapy, and it's like in a psychology journal or something else like that. That's always super exciting. But yeah, making sure that that's more accessible. But I had this really funny conversation with a family member who's a physical therapist the other night. He just is starting his own physical therapy business, and we were kidding, and I was like, I'll lead a harmonica group for you for Parkinson's patients. You know, bring in patients to your clinic. And we were having a really funny conversation about it because he laughed at me at first, and he was like, ha ha ha, if you want to start it, like, it will bring people in. And then I started talking about it, and I started talking about harmonica with COPD, which is another group that I lead through internship. And I was like, yeah, don't tell me you're taking a full breath because I can hear it. And he like paused and he went, that's brilliant. I was like, yeah, we know what we're doing. Like, this is not this is not something that we just like do for fun. But that's the thing, is that even like within my own family, somebody who's been very supportive of my career choice and like really has tried to learn still is not, like, it's not connecting. So yeah, having access to our research and, you know, integrating that more would be amazing. Very helpful.
It also ties into what Leah stated about being goal-oriented music therapy and changing
methods.
From pathology to method-based, which I think Dr. Wagner also touched on that too. And that was a very interesting, because I was taught pathological sense.
Yeah, my program was population-based and literally changed to method-based this past fall. They shifted it, and it sounds amazing, like an amazing program that came in, but it's a very interesting viewpoint because Leah is right in that it can be hard as a young professional to make that shift when you learned through pathology or population. It can be hard to like shift some of those things between populations. You're like, this is what I do with older adults. This is what I do like with children with developmental delays. Like, instead of being able to be like, these are the types of interventions I use, and they can go across the board. But that also could just be me.
I've never heard of it, and it was very interesting, so I'd have to see how that plays out. I understand why they do it for educational purposes, making it easier to teach a class, like this is children's unit. Like, I see why. It would be harder to break up methods in my head. Maybe that's because of the way I was informed, so I'm not sure and how that would look.
That's the other part, though, about like where we're at in music therapy right now and those priorities of growth is that we're still in like trial and error.
Yeah.
We're still in that phase where we're like, okay, our programs are shifting. And that's something that Dr. Reuer brought up as well, is we need more music therapy programs. Like we need, and that ties into the access as well, we need more universities to have music therapy programs. And not only more music therapy programs, but more informed music therapy programs.
Yeah, when David mentioned about informed expansion, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I really loved that because I know as a music therapist or future MTBC, there's a lot of times where I've seen even in other students or myself, like, oh, yes, I can do this. I am great. I'm a music therapist. And then if someone were to confront me, do I have that research to back me up? Like, am I ready to go?
Well, not only that,
Like,
but then you observe someone, you think you're hot stuff. And by
yeah.
you, I mean me. I think I'm hot stuff. And then I go observe somebody do the exact same session that I was just doing. Like, literally, it's the exact same goals, population, whatever you're talking about. And I'm like, wow, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Nothing at all. I
Don't
have
you love
no
those
idea
moments?
what's happening.
I love those
And
moments.
it's great, though, because you learn so much, but you also learn how much you don't know. So that informed expansion of being like, these are our top priorities, but also knowing what you don't know so you can continue to grow.
And just continue to do that research so that we can keep adding on to those layers and growing as a profession and to get that licensure and to get recognized as a medical professional. That would be so great.
Yeah. Something that Dr. Wagner brought up that I don't think we had time to put in the podcast is this idea that music therapy expansion is two branches. It's what music therapists are and how we're going and our research and what we know and how we grow as a profession. And then it's what the public knows and how the public can digest what we do and how we can advocate that to them. Because if one is not growing or one is not ready for the other, they have to shift at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
The public's ready for more music, but they're not ready for more music therapy positions. We are ready for more music therapy positions, but like we can't, I don't know if that makes sense. Like we have to grow at the same time. She stated it very eloquently.
She stated it very beautifully. And Sarah talked about being able to advocate and educate the public in their terms as well, too. Like she mentioned earlier that there was a problem there. So it's just a problem in general, a whole communication issue with other professionals, with the public, within ourselves.
But also just making sure that we're focusing efforts on both ends.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It can be very frustrating to have to defend and explain what you do 20 times a day. But if the public's not ready, we're not getting jobs. Like if they are not educated and we're not marketing,
Yeah.
nothing's happening. So we have to be able to focus on that as well as what is our research? How do we continue to grow? How do we continue to be informed? Like what things do we need to learn and what are our next steps as a profession? What are our inner steps for the AMTA? But then what is happening over here with everybody else?
Mm-hmm. So basically, we would like you as an audience to comment below and continue this discussion.
Yeah, keep talking about it 'cause we don't have enough time.
I know, yeah. Comment on what you think other generations don't know or are not seeing, or comment what you think we need to grow as a society of music therapists. Below, like, share. Now it's time for our resource corner, which I'm really excited about because, hey, here's a resource for you to use every day.
Okay, first up, Renee, what do we got? What's our first free resource?
Okay, my first app for you is called Relax Melody. And this app is amazing, especially if you want to incorporate the Native American flute in your sessions, because I have at the hospital. So basically, it helps with, like, here, I'm going to move closer to the mic so you guys can hear. They have, like, river or like rain, or like ocean. So let's say you want to have a relaxing ocean, you could put like a flute over it.
Oh, cool. So it plays that flute noise and then you just like go over it. Can you
Yeah.
pick the key?
You can't pick the key, unfortunately, but you can mix the sound levels of each one so you can make them louder and softer as you layer them. And there's a bunch of stuff. I really like this one.
Ooh, like
While
drone.
doing, kind of like while you're doing like guided imagery or something along those lines.
Some relaxation,
Yeah.
like receptive methods. Mm-hmm. Is it easy for clients to put? It doesn't play, right? You just like tap it. And it plays.
Yeah, so all you do is tap and it just plays. So I had birds playing, and if I wanted to like find, there's like wind and trees and thunder, you can make a storm.
Soundscape.
Yeah, basically you can add a soundscape where you can either improvise over or like increase the guided imagery by like asking them, where do you like to go? A forest? Okay, make forest sounds and then start your guided relaxation, and they can really submerge themselves. I highly recommend that, and you can put it for a timer, you can play them, you can mix the sound together. It's great. I love it.
So our next one is an app called Figure. And I'm going to be very honest with y'all. I have not played with this a lot because my supervisor literally introduced this to me 2 weeks ago when I walked into a session. And this 14-year-old was like, I only like rap. And I was like, wow, I don't know any rap songs. And I was going to make something up, but I wasn't quick enough. And he literally excused me. He said, you can leave now.
Oh, no.
And I said, okay. So we walked out of the room, and I was talking to my supervisor, and she was like, hey, you can improvise over beats. Like, you can download apps where you can create beats and improvise, which we can do this on GarageBand as well. But this is something that's really cool on this app, that you can let them create the beat, and then both of you can rap over it, or whoever it's happening. So on this app, you can record what you set up, but it has drum, bass, and lead. It has different patterns, so you can like pick, what time signature you're in and what that looks like. And then, this is really quiet. Let's see if I can get a little 4.
You know what song I'm singing?
No.
Oh my god.
And then you can like switch it, so you can be like,
It's a dial. She's spinning a dial.
yeah, sorry, y'all can't see me.
Ooh. Oh, that changed everything. There's 4 squares that you can hold your fingers down and add them.
And then you can also do it with the bass.
Oh. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so you can create some beats, you can do it in different styles, and do some songwriting, do some expression.
Another app that I'm going to plug is one from IQ Sonics, and they're developing an app called Sing and Speak for Kids. It's an online music-based language program to support young children with delayed speech development. It's a fun program using clinically tested therapy called Developmental Speech Language Training Through Music, DSLM, and it serves as a supplement to other speech therapy modalities and will be guided by training team of teachers, therapists, and families.
I got work on my adolescent rep. I'm sorry. Anyway.
Speaking of work, we really need your patient and client interaction stories and your go-to tips, tricks, and resources. So submit that. That's your work for us.
Yeah, y'all got homework. Submit those resources, those tips and tricks, because next week it's on y'all.
Keep the conversations going in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, interact.
Submit.
R&B out.